Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. For episode 62, I had the pleasure of interviewing Phil Lilienthal, who is the founder and president of Global Camps Africa. I hope you are as inspired by Phil and his story as I am. Enjoy this episode. Well, I am thrilled today to have one of my heroes here on the podcast, and we are actually doing this interview live at my camp office because Phil Lilienthal has come all the way across the country, and not just for this podcast episode, but I was able to get him in here for just a few minutes. So welcome, Phil Lilienthal.
Thank you, Audrey. Great to be here.
Phil, why don't you just tell a little bit about your background and how we came to meet each other in the camp world?
Well, I've grown up in camp. My father owned the camp that I ended up running and owning. Grew up in New York, went to New York schools, college in Massachusetts, went to law school, following my father's example of what you do in the off season if you're not completely immersed in camp. Went in the Peace Corps. My wife and I were married during my law school, her social work graduate studies. Went to Ethiopia as a lawyer and ended up 6 months later starting a camp there. And that got me in the mood, in the frame of mind to think globally for camp rather than to think locally. Right. Naive growing up in the 50s and 60s, I thought camp was a U.S. institution, and how could kids abroad get as much out of camp as we did? And the experience in Ethiopia just was mind-blowing, to see kids come and enjoy camp just the way kids here do. And we look at it now and we say, well, of course, because we've all had so much international involvement with kids. But back then it was, you're ashamed of and embarrassed of certain naivetés, and this was one of mine, and I can admit to it. But it was very exciting. I didn't put it into effect right away. I came home, raised a family, ran the family camp, and then 35 years after leaving Ethiopia, in my what might have been retirement, I decided to go back to Africa and start camps.
Oh my gosh, what a great story. You know what, I knew about the Peace Corps part. I didn't know about the camp in Ethiopia. So tell me a little bit more about that. How long were you doing that?
Well, Peace Corps is normally a 2-year stint.
Okay.
We got there in September, and in March, it was while Haile Selassie was still the emperor, and his granddaughters were educated in England. And one of them came back and said, I guess there were camps in England that she was exposed to or heard about camps in the U.S., and went to her grandfather and said, we really should have a summer camp here for kids. And Haile Selassie, I'm making this up a little bit, went to the Peace Corps to say, well,
right.
This is
Can
an
you guys
American.
do this? Yeah,
it's an American institution.
Right.
Do you have any Americans who could do this? And one of our Peace Corps staff members knew of my involvement in camp, right, and my parents.
Right.
And of course, my involvement was I was a camper and I'd been a counselor for 2 years. I knew nothing.
All right. So you ended up, your Peace Corps role became this camp.
Well, interestingly enough, it became what my life was after Peace Corps.
Okay.
Part-time law, part-time camp.
Okay.
So it was very interesting. While I was in Ethiopia, I kept my day job, my lawyer job, and this was in March. for July 1st to start camp. And we needed to find a site, we needed to find kids, we needed to find equipment, we needed to find blah, 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 blah. And it was the most fun I think I've ever had in my life, having, okay, kids, let's put on a show. And we had some Peace Corps volunteers as counselors and some Ethiopians as counselors. The lost opportunity, if you will. Now, granted, this was not to change the world. This was to start a camp. So I copied everything from Winnebago right down to the Good Night song. And we were on Camp Langano. So instead of Good Night Winnebago, it was Good Night Camp Langano. So these Ethiopian kids wondering what they're singing about. So it was lovely. It was lovely. But that we had some Winnebagans being trained. When I went back, it was a different story. I had matured, I had other views, and it was a different kind of a camp. But it was a riot. So I had one session of 60 for 2 weeks the first summer. And the second summer, we were there 2 summers, we had 4 groups of 75. And in the process of that summer, I had a counterpart, an Ethiopian counterpart who worked for the YMCA, and I was turning it over to him, and the YMCA ran it for 7 years after I left until Haile Selassie was overthrown. The new communist regime didn't want any youth development work, and they closed the camp.
That's too bad.
So, yes, but at least it had legs and didn't end when I left, which is always the problem of Peace Corps projects. The Peace Corps volunteers can get very proud of them, but unless they have some sustainability built in, that's how all of these.
That's how all these programs are, and that's like the program we're going to talk about next, which is something that so where I first met you was at a camp conference. I don't know what year, maybe 10 years ago. How long ago did you start Global Camps Africa?
It's been going since 2004.
Okay, so 14 years ago. So I think it was maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I feel like it was at a coastal conference, but that's what my recollection. But I remember just being in awe of what you've done, which is you ran a very successful private camp, Winnebago in Maine, for many years. And then instead of resting on your laurels and relaxing in retirement, you decided to go back to this place that you loved, Africa, and use some of the skills that you've built in your great career here in America to start this new program. So Global Camps Africa, tell the story of what the purpose of the camp is, how you decided to start it.
The purpose of the camp is to use camp as a vehicle for meeting the needs of developing youth in poor areas of the country, of a foreign country. Now, people say, why don't you do it in the U.S.? Well, it's being done in the U.S. In Africa, there are virtually no camps doing this. So I thought this could be a Johnny Appleseed kind of thing where people could copy it and spread the word. So I wanted to, it's the classic case of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So my only skill that I could bring was camp. And so
it's a great skill. It's such a good skill.
I think the audience listening to this will probably buy into that. Not everybody in the world would, but use the skill you have to do something that's maybe going to be meaningful. There was no guarantee of any kind. And I don't think I had a plan B. When I decided to do this and to sell camp, and one of my family members bought it, I don't think I considered that it wasn't going to work. I really don't think I had what I would do. I'd probably go out and get a job. But anyway,
start a different camp.
Start a different.
You probably would have.
Yeah. So I did one thing that was, any of us could have done this. I mean, I really want to stress that. I'm happy to get the praise for having the guts to do it, but the skill involved, 1,000 of us could have done that. So my first step was just declaring I was going to do it instead of talking about it as I had done for 35 years. I said, boy, this is really something sort of, when I grow up, this is what I'd like to do. And one of my close friends one day said, Phil, you're there.
You're grown up now.
Why don't you either do it or stop talking about it?
Right.
There's a more colloquial expression that I won't use.
Yeah.
But just do it. And so I said, you're right. You're right. The future is now. So one, I said I was going to do it. That was one big thing. Second big thing is I took a trip to Africa in May of 2003 to look for a good local partner to run it when I wasn't going to be there, because we weren't going to move over there for like we did in Peace Corps. We weren't going to live there. So I went to South Africa, Botswana, and Kenya, places where I had some contact, just to find a local person, group, organization. I didn't know what I was looking for.
Right.
But I wanted to look. And I sent out emails to everybody I knew and got connected. And I had a very busy month and very productive. We could have gone to any of those countries. It would have been great. And I just chose South Africa because that was what I thought was the most mature outfit to work with. It was a big psychosocial AIDS clinic. They had done a lot of work with kids, and they wanted to do it. And they didn't know how to do it. They had put in proposals for a camp with the World Health Organization and I think it was Save the Children, another large nonprofit. Right. And they were told, what, have you done a needs assessment? Have you done a feasibility study? Blah, blah, blah. And I come along like Mr. Magoo, just sort of, hey, I'm going to start a camp. Anybody want to partner with me? Right. And they were so suspicious. They thought I was playing games with them, knowing that they had failed, the group in South Africa. Wow. And but they had a budget ready by the time I returned to the U.S. They had ideas for where we were going to have it, who the kids were going to be, and we were just in sync. It was wonderful. The only thing was that the person running it for them was a little skeptical of this whole life skills overlay that I wanted to have. She said, let's just give these kids a respite from the strife of their daily lives. They're into survival mode. They don't get more than a meal a day, maybe 2 meals. They're never having enough money to save. They never have a future in their education because of school fees. Give them a break. And I said, we can always go back to that, but let's see if we can give them, what are the biggest issues they face in life in reaching a healthy, productive adulthood? And I said, you guys figure that out, because I don't know. And then we'll train counselors in how to remedy that, how to give them the information they need. And we did. And even though the subjects like HIV and AIDS and sexuality were completely taboo in the household, if they brought it up in the home, they would get slapped. No question. It was rude to bring it up. And I said, well, how can we teach this and have it be accepted? And my counterpart said, don't worry about it. The parents will be fine. And they were. They just didn't want to have to deal with it in the household. They didn't want to do it themselves,
but they wanted they didn't mind someone else doing it.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good.
That was, one big issue. And the rest has all been everything great. It's just a question of narrowing it down. We started with one life skills class, met for an hour every day with every group in small groups, 14 kids in a group. There were so many things to cover. Now we have 2 life skills classes a day, meeting with 14 kids in a group and everybody getting 2 life skills classes. And in the evening, we usually have one evening during the week, the 8 days that we run camp, where we just have to open it up for discuss more.
Right. Yeah.
Like everybody's got, you open that door. What was the old
Ask Anything.
Mrs. McGee's closet? It was something back in the 30s. Anyways, it was a big thing. Fibber McGee and Molly. And you open this closet. It was a standing joke, and everything came tumbling out. And it was a radio show, but so you could imagine it. Anyway, this is opening the door to just everything that they've wanted to ask about their whole lives and have never been able to get out. So we stimulate that, and my goodness,
that's awesome.
It just comes pouring out.
Okay, so so now they do these 2 life skills classes, and I know also in between they're doing like campy stuff like swimming and sort of, so it's like camp. It's an overnight camp. They're all staying there. They're in these groups, he said, of 14, and they're doing these classes, what other activities do you have them doing, and what else is going on?
Well, it's a very rigorous schedule, and there are no choices.
Okay.
So they take everything every day.
Okay.
Swimming, theater, arts and crafts, nutrition, yoga, and 2 life skills classes, and sports. So we have 8 periods a day, a rest hour, and an evening assembly.
Okay.
And then there's an evening program every day except the night that we have the discussion.
The closet.
Yeah.
They opened up the closet and answer all the questions. And how old are the kids?
We've now narrowed it. 13 to 15 to answer the question.
Okay.
The reason for 13 to 15 is we only allow the kids to come to camp once. So we want to get them at the age when they presumably, in our guessing, will most need it. So we don't want we started with 8-year-olds, and all the talk about sexuality and HIV and AIDS, it's lost. And it's their one chance to get it.
Right.
So we want to get it to the right audience. So 13 to 15, but then what we do to remedy this one and done, is we have clubs that meet in their neighborhoods every other week, and we're thinking of making that every week, where they come back, they have a day camp program on a Saturday, and they have a creative activity, either arts and crafts or theater. They have sports. They always have singing and dancing, which is a major part, and they have life skills. And we have a year curriculum of follow-up life skills.
Amazing.
And then we put them into a leadership program, and they become counselors in training, and then counselors. And when these kids leave camp from their 8 days, every single one of them, the biggest question is, how do I become a counselor? That's all they want to do. After they've been told, the first question is, how can I come back?
Right.
And when they're told they can't, how can I be a counselor? They just idolize their counselors. They don't have role models like the counselors in any other part of their lives.
Right.
They don't have little league coaches. They don't have community activities. This is it. They go to school and they go home, and they don't have the extracurricular stuff we have. So when they see a big brother, big sister figure doing the things that we think of that big brothers and big sisters should do, they are in heaven. They're really in heaven. This is the best thing that ever happened to them.
And your counselors are all from South Africa. Like the counselors,
Yes.
and I love that part of your program. So you have occasionally people from America can come over and volunteer and, help maybe serve a meal or take a photo. But the real people running the program and the leaders in the program are probably kids who now have grown up at the program?
Many of them have. But we have a Black South African leadership program, mostly from Soweto, which is the area that we serve. But, we don't bar people from other places.
Right.
And we welcome foreigners. They're mostly Americans. We've had some 200 volunteers from about 15 countries. Some in Africa and some in other places, but we want people coming over to know that they're basically assisting the South African counselors.
Right.
Now, for a camp director to come over and just teach swimming without having to worry about all the scheduling and all the administrative, it's like a vacation.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's just great.
Really awesome.
But even camp counselors, they're just great additions. And the biggest thing that they bring, quite honestly, although the skills are wonderful, but the biggest thing they bring is showing that people from outside South Africa care about these kids. Mm-hmm. The question that the kids ask the most, besides can I stay longer and can I be a counselor, these people coming over, paying their own way, making a contribution, don't even know me. Why are they coming over? They can't get the concept of why people from over here would want to come.
Right.
And for them to see foreigners and play with, they're used to seeing foreigners as being the big shots in the country.
Right.
So to have people down on their hands and knees playing with them or asking questions, just talking to them. Right. Adults don't talk to kids. They give them orders. But just to say, what do you think, is something they never hear. But then when they get used to it, they tell you what they think, and it opens it up. It's great. Yeah. And then when they get home, the parents, the teachers especially, say, without knowing who's been to camp, they know who's been to camp. The whole attitude changes. The kids are
Isn't that amazing?
challenging the
Probably more
teachers.
confident,
Much
and
more.
speaking up for themselves, and they know more things actually after
Well,
being taught those life skills. So
they do.
just going back, I'm curious. I know you can't go into all the details, but what are some samples of the life skills that you're teaching when they're at the 8-day camp? What are some of the classes that they take?
Right. Well, I mentioned sexuality and HIV/AIDS. Most of the AIDS transmission in South Africa is heterosexual sex. They've got to know about sex so you can know how to prevent disease. We deal with abusive behaviors. We deal with gender bias. We deal with xenophobia, fear of foreigners. We deal with drugs, crimes, alcohol, reproductive health. I mean, and financial literacy. These kids have no
financial literacy. Amazing.
Yeah, we had two donors give us $20,000 to get a curriculum together, and we're doing it more through the clubs. But we try to introduce it. I'm on Messenger, part of Facebook Messenger, with one of our former campers who's trying to sell hamburgers and sandwiches to kids at school, and I'm trying to get her to get together a business plan so she does it the right way. So there are so many needs. It's just how many hours do you have to teach these life skills, because they keep going and going and going.
Okay, so let's talk about the life skill of parenting, or how you teach that to the kids.
We have a wonderful woman who, I don't know how she found us. Her name is Amy Berman. She runs the Mother Bear Project out of Minneapolis. And she has thousands of people who knit teddy bears, send them to her, and she sends them overseas to AIDS-affected children all over Africa. And at first, we didn't think this was going to be a wonderful thing. We don't like to give the kids things that are just things. We want them to be instructive, and we realize, well, these can be their children, and we can be teaching teen parenting. We can, never mind teen parenting, we can be teaching parenting skills by using the bears. So the boys and the girls get bears. They're told, these are your babies, take care of them. And of course, they take care of them, they'll cuddle them, they'll put them on their back for the first day. And then they'll start getting sloppy, and they'll put them on the floor underneath their chair. We say you always have to keep your baby with you. But when they put them down on the ground or they throw them to the side, we remind them that this is probably not the way you would treat your baby, and you better be aware that this is a 24/7 responsibility. So we don't say you shouldn't have children at age 15. We just remind them of the skills that are needed and the responsibility. And this is how we do all the life skills. We don't tell them that they shouldn't drink, or they shouldn't do this, or they shouldn't have sex. We just remind them that there are consequences, and there's no completely safe way to drink, have sex, any activity that has negatives. You have to be aware of those before you begin.
And I think it's probably really powerful that these role model counselors who they look up to are the ones leading these discussions, likely, right? Like, it's these people they look up to are kind of just helping them think through these things.
Well, it's beautiful to watch. It really is beautiful. The counselors all have this way of discussing a subject that's judgmental.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Perfect. They just open up the subject, and they say, a lot of people love smoking. A lot of people love drinking. A lot of people love pot. A lot of people love whatever. What do you think? What are the goods and bads? And we have people line up on either side. We'll ask different questions, and there'll be a back and forth on it. And it's a marvelous discussion. It brings out a lot, and people are really challenged not only to confront their assumptions and prejudices about something, but to think about it, that there are two sides to it. It's not just an automatic, no, I'll never do that until I'm married, or, yeah, this is fun, of course I'll do it. And, well, there are consequences to both sets of activities.
Yeah. Wow, and I think, too, what a powerful thing just to get these kids thinking about making their own decisions. So even, whatever life skill you're talking about, just having them have that time to reflect is very powerful, because when you think about, a lot of kids don't ever take any time to make a decision before they're in a situation. And that's the problem, right? A lot of bad things happen when, you just didn't realize you'd be in a situation and you'd end up doing something that later leads to bad consequences. But if you've had this time to think through and have all this discussion, that's got to be helpful to them to be feeling a little more empowered, that they do have more choices and decision-making power than just going along with what other people are doing.
You've got to get very, very specific. Mm-hmm. And the classic case for a young boy is you've got a girl that you're very attracted to, and you have this wild session, and you don't have any protection. What do? Do you say, "Excuse me, I'm going to go out and buy a condom. I'll see you tomorrow"? And what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. It's not enough to say, "Oh, I'll always use a condom." Always da da da. Right. And you've got to be faced before the fact. You've got to realize you're going to be faced with very difficult situations, and mature people wouldn't necessarily know how to handle it, because in the throes of passion, you can do a lot of silly things, and we just try to make them aware of them.
Yeah, that is so true. I think I've heard before, and I'm sure you guys would do this because of this, but you got to role play what you're going to say. Right? Isn't that part of your thing? Is like not just saying this decision that I've made, like, oh, I'm not going to have sex or I'm going to use a condom, but you have to actually say, well, like that situation, well, how are you going to make that happen? Well, if that's your decision, what are you going to say? What are your words? What are some different options you have? Let them really come up with that, because you can't just tell kids don't do drugs. Right. What are you going to do when your best friend, what's something you could say? What's your response going to be?
You've got to get as granular as possible, and get it right down to the nitty-gritty of your friends are pressuring you to do something, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your inside emotions, your parent. I mean, it's just making it real and making it as real as possible. And basically what we're doing at camp, and it really comes down to two things. On the positive side, it's empowerment, but on the neutral side, we're just giving the kids choice. We want them to have choices. Every time they walk out of their door, the gangsters, the gangs that are greeting them, the prostitutes who are on the street for the girls saying, come on, we'll get some easy money. We just want them to be able to say, okay, yeah, I want to be a gang member. Or I want to go do some community service today, which is what they're doing at the clubs, or I want to be part of the soccer team, or the this or the that. And we don't want them to feel they have to do something automatically. We just want them to do and we want them to do it with a prism of looking at what's best for them, not just what's going to be subjecting themselves to peer pressure.
Yeah, wow. Well, this is true not just for kids in Africa.
Right.
But that's great that you have the ongoing club thing, and that's one of the key things about your program that I think is especially interesting, and something I would love to try to do here. Even at, I feel like that's one of the things with the camps. We have this fabulous time with kids, and we get to pour into them, and they learn all these things. But keeping that up and that mentorship all year, it would be so amazing. And so I'm going to have to pick your brain about that separately, not in this podcast, but I really like that concept. So when they come to the camps, first of all, do they almost all come to these Saturday camps? Like, do you get good like return rate kind of the kids?
It's less good than we had hoped.
Oh, okay.
Too many of them have too many other responsibilities at home.
Right.
And in fact, one new program that we got was giving a life skills light curriculum for young kids.
Okay.
Because so many of them so many campers came back, had to take care of the younger brothers and sisters, ended up bringing them to the clubs and just parking them and say, I'll be back.
Right.
And so we said, instead of being in a glorified child care center, let's develop a curriculum for all these kids who've never been to camp.
Amazing.
So about hygiene and about being nice to each other, sort of just a nice, and so they stay at the clubs until they can age up to come.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful.
They look forward to being old enough to come. So we get a lot of kids coming after they've been at clubs, which is just a reversal, but especially in Africa, you have to be so flexible. You say, what the heck?
Whoever's here.
If you're here,
if you're here, we'll give you some life skills.
Exactly.
That is so awesome. So about how many kids will come to these things on Saturday? I'm just trying to envision.
The six clubs we have now, I think we average about 100 at each one.
So 600 kids.
600 kids.
That seems like a pretty
well,
good...
now that's 300 a week, but 600 for every round of clubs.
And are these clubs, and then the leaders at these clubs, are they the same people who run the camps for you?
Most of them are.
Okay.
Most of them are. Some of them can only come to clubs. They can't get away for a whole camp, but they can volunteer on Saturdays. Sure. We're just getting the largest, we have pro bono work being done by, I think it's the largest law firm in South Africa. Brilliant. Great place. They're just getting to send some of their lawyers to the clubs to do some work with the kids, mostly on financial literacy, but just to get them involved with kids from the townships.
Yes. That is so amazing. So I want to now just shift gears a little bit, because do you know, or have you done like research, or do you have any like outcomes about your kids? So now you've been doing it for 14 years. What do you know about kids who've been to your program? Like obviously their teachers see a difference in them. Do you have any data on like what's happening with these kids who've been to your program, the impact that it's having?
We had the camp guru, Gwen Powell, come over and do a 5-year study of before and after effects. And we've had a bunch of others, and we are just engaging. I think they started. That's right, they started already. The University of Pretoria has a very fine social work department that has gotten a survey together and is going to follow these kids from South Africa over a long period of time. And this will be the best, because Gwen, of course, couldn't come over every camp, but we would bring the surveys back to her. Right. And so what some of the findings we've gotten has been one. I should know them better. One is for first sexual encounters, our boys have, or our men and women use condoms at a much higher level. Awesome. Much higher percentage. Yeah. They stay in school longer. And the third one, I think, might be related to jobs. I actually forget it, but
that's okay. You know what we can do? We can put in the notes. If you have like a little article about it or something, I can just link to that with the findings from Gwen, but I think that's thing. And then my next thing is I have loved being a supporter of Global Camps Africa. And I know that you're fully funded by mostly private donations.
Exactly.
And what does it cost for someone to like donate to send one child through this 8-day program, plus the whole year-round, clubs and all of that?
Great. Yeah, it's still about $500, which is what it was right at the beginning. Our costs have gone up, and we have more staff, but it's basically $500 sends a kid to camp and a year of the youth clubs. And
that's a huge value.
Well, the biggest value really is that you're launching a child into being a productive citizen. And so many things that I give to, are just survival mechanism. It's not really getting somebody beyond that, staying alive. And we need charities that can keep people alive. Right. But this is not just keeping somebody alive. It's making him a good citizen.
Right. Well, it really resonates with me because it's about well-being. It's about teaching these kids what I love is become thriving adults. Exactly. You are giving them tools and teaching them skills that will change the trajectory of their life. Can't really say that very
perfect.
Well,
couldn't have said it better. That's exactly right.
So anyway, I am just so excited to have you on. This is a great time of year to be talking about Global Camps Africa, because obviously you'll accept donations probably any time of year.
And any amounts.
And any amounts,
yes.
And I really like the idea, especially for any camp people who are listening, is to make this maybe something that your camp wants to support, or your staff at your camp, or families at your camp. And even if you got all the campers to donate $10 each and you get a bunch of kids, how cool would it be to feel that connection that, you love camp, your kids go to camp or whatever, and you're also helping these other kids go to camp.
And there's one more layer on top of that. Since the very earliest days, we have not been having camps run during June, July, August. That's their winter when it's quite chilly.
Right.
Well, what this does, it releases our counselors, the best counselors, to come over to U.S. camps and be valuable members of U.S. camp staffs because they're all well trained, they all have camp experience, and they are devoted to the kids. So not only can a camp support us, but you can get a South African counselor at your camp for just what you would pay an international counselor.
What? How many counselors are you having come over these days? Like how many come over generally?
Last year was 18.
Wow, that is so great.
And they were as far away from South Africa as Washington State.
Right.
And up to Maine.
Well, we need to talk to you earlier this year. I'll have you talk to our personnel director after. Okay, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and telling us all about Global Camps Africa. It's just an amazing program, and you must feel pretty good about this work you're doing. Thank you for listening. For notes and information about Phil and Global Camps Africa, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 62. You'll find notes, links, and more information there. While you're at my website, if you don't already subscribe to my weekly emails, I would love to invite you to join me, and I can then send you each week emails with recent posts and podcast episodes. I'm going to leave you today with a quote that is inspiring to me and reminds me of Phil. It's from Martin Luther King. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.